older than the boys themselves, meaning that regardless of when you started watching it, you're probably closer to Candace's age now that you move on to adulthood.
I know you don't know what I mean, but you're not gonna know it till you turn 18. It's called adulting.
And with that added bit of maturity, I think we can all agree Candace is definitely the most relatable character on the show.
Every day, I get beaten down by the universe. I just feel so defeated.
Big mood, Candace. Big mood. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Film Theory, the show that wakes up every morning knowing exactly what it's gonna do today, ruin someone's childhood. So, between episodes of WandaVision, I decided that I needed to find something else to validate my subscription to Disney+, which meant that I finally found some time to watch the big exclusive animated film from 2020 that everyone's been raving about, Candace Against the Universe, the Phineas and Ferb movie. Did anyone else know that this existed? Yeah, I didn't either until I started digging around in the Disney Plus library. True to form, this new Phineas and Ferb adventure has everything you could hope for, plus several neat twists to set this one apart from the rest of the series, the biggest of which is a new villain. And a new villain means new things to theorize about. And let me tell you, as I started researching this villain, I not only uncovered some startling things about the core premise of the movie, but also had some deep existential revelations about the nature of humanity itself. Like the fact that we, as a species, regularly breathe poison. So, are you ready for the best theory ever? Well, this one is not it. Hey, just trying to be honest. We have done hundreds of theories and only one can truly be the best. But while it may not be the best, it is a fun one talking about a childhood classic series with a lot of interesting science. So what else would you subscribe to this channel for? Oh wait, I do know the reason to subscribe. Our upcoming theories on Hazbin Hotel and another Phineas and Ferb one that does talk about the lore of the series and everyone's favorite character, Dr. Doof. So Candace Against the Universe kicks off when Phineas and Ferb's sister Candace gets abducted by aliens.
Candace apparently has been abducted by aliens.
To rescue her, Phineas and Ferb must team up with Dr. Doofenshmirtz for a rescue mission, with Perry the Platypus tagging along to keep him safe. Luckily, Dr. Doof has a spaceship that they can all use to chase the alien kidnappers.
I don't have a spaceship per se, but I do have my galactic travelinator.
Sorry, Galactic Travelinator. The alien ship lands on the planet Fibla Oot in the Roblox cluster.
The Roblox cluster.
Vroblock cluster. Jeez, try saying that one 5 times fast.
Roblox.
Huh, I guess it's not that hard.
Roblox.
At first, the alien abductors seem pretty friendly. They consider Candace the chosen one due to her ability to produce a rare element that they desperately need.
We have spent years searching the galaxy for Remarkalonium, and our instruments tell us that element simply emanates from you.
Candace gets herself a warm welcome and really hits it off with the alien's leader, Super Big Doctor.
I'm Super Big Doctor. Is that a title or your... It's a common enough name in our language.
All seems to be going well enough for Candace until we learn about an underground race of aliens, the Cowards, who ran away there after Super Big Doctor invaded their planet.
We are called the Cowards. In our language, it means cow.
You see, Super Big Doctor has an evil power, the ability to control the minds of other species. She does this using a plant called Mama. To be clear, the plant isn't her mother, it was just named after her.
I named her after my mother, whose name just happened to be Mama. Weird coincidence. She was also green and very controlling.
Mama is the reason Candace needs to generate Remarkalonium.
Remarkalonium is Mama's lifeblood. But thanks to you, now she can grow again and produce her wonderful mind-controlling spores. Wait, mind-controlling spores?
And it's here that we learn what exactly Remarkalonium is.
In your language, I think it's called carbon dioxide, or CO2.
Wait, your rare element is carbon dioxide?
Not to be the but-actually guy here, Candace, but actually carbon dioxide isn't an element. It's technically a chemical compound that consists of 2 different elements, carbon and oxygen. But go off, Candace, go off.
Well, on Earth, everybody exhales carbon dioxide, genius.
And with that, the cat's out of the bag. The aliens set their sights on Earth and go for a full-on alien invasion, meaning it's up to the gang to team up and stop them. The premise is, like any regular episode of Phineas and Ferb, absolutely fun and completely outlandish. But as you can already tell, it's also based on some science. The crazy thing is, though, when you follow the science to its logical conclusion, it actually leads back to an interesting twist for the movie's story, one that completely flips the movie's conclusion on its head. So let's just walk through my line of thinking here. First, when Super Big Doctor says that Mama, the mind-controlling plant, needs carbon dioxide to grow and thrive, she is 100% correct. All plants need carbon dioxide as one of its critical ingredients required for photosynthesis, the chemical reaction that allows plants to convert solar energy into usable energy. The other ingredient for photosynthesis is water. Obviously, no big surprises there. The photosynthesis reaction, when written out in chemical terms, looks like this. Breaking it down, this should be pretty straightforward. 6 parts CO2, carbon dioxide, plus 6 parts H2O, water, gives us 6 parts O2, oxygen, and 1 part glucose, sugar. No need to dive into the Krebs cycle this time, my friends. This time. And creating glucose is great for the plant, since it's a highly concentrated form of energy that the plant can use, or that we can use if we chop it down and eat it. But the oxygen is actually useless to the plant. It's essentially a waste product released into the atmosphere, largely because oxygen is actually a corrosive gas. Now, that might sound extreme, but it's totally not. Earth's atmosphere is only about 20% oxygen, and this is the sweet spot for us. Breathing concentrations higher than that can cause cell damage in your respiratory system, your vision, even your central nervous system. But despite its corrosive properties, oxygen in smaller doses is useful to us. In chemical terms, our cells are basically doing photosynthesis in reverse. Our cells consume glucose and oxygen to produce carbon dioxide and water. Yeah, if you didn't realize it, you're exhaling H2O every time you breathe out. That's why a mirror will get foggy when you breathe on it. In short, we share a symbiotic relationship with plants. We breathe out what they need to survive, and they produce what we need to live. So why then is Super Big Doctor in need of a human like Candace when basically anyone can create CO2? Well, the alien respiratory system doesn't work in the same way.
We inhale oxygen and exhale oxygen.
This means that the planet of Fibla Oot doesn't have enough carbon dioxide to make her mind-control plant grow. Except here's the thing, she's wrong. She is completely and utterly wrong about that. There should be more than enough CO2 on that planet. And we know it for one reason, mushrooms. In almost every shot of Fibla Oot, we see that the planet is populated with gigantic mushrooms. And mushrooms, funny enough, don't work like plants, largely because they're not plants. Mushrooms are unable to make their own food. It's also why fungi aren't green. They don't have the green chloroplasts that are necessary for photosynthesis to happen. Instead, fungi function a lot more similarly to humans. They breathe just like us. Speaking in the broadest of strokes, they inhale oxygen and they exhale CO2. But to be more specific, because that's also a gross simplification of what's going on here, as plants grow, they absorb CO2. Fungi then decompose that plant matter and other living materials, which frees the CO2 back out into the environment. Just like with animals, fungi produce CO2 as a byproduct of their natural metabolism, and not insignificant amounts of the stuff either. For instance, a patch of pearl oyster mushrooms can release up to roughly half its own weight in CO2, which means that CO2 is not the problem with Super Big Doctor's mama plant. Adding to this theory is the fact that when the alien species invades Earth, the mama plant actually grows so fast that it becomes a monster. If CO2 levels were indeed the issue holding the plant's growth back, Earth's atmosphere would not be the explanation. Carbon dioxide is just a trace gas in our atmosphere, making up 0.04% of the air that we breathe. So again, Super Big Doctor's plan seems to be flawed at its most basic of basic levels. Instead, what I think is really going on here isn't a carbon shortage, it's a nitrogen shortage. Mama needs her nitro, my friends. It may seem like I'm splitting hairs here, but I'm not, and you're about to see why. You see, nitrogen is so vital to plants because it's a major component of chlorophyll, the compound that plants need to do photosynthesis in the first place. Without nitrogen, and by proxy chlorophyll, all the water and carbon dioxide in the world is going to be useless to a given plant. It's also a major component of amino acids, the building blocks of proteins. Without proteins, plants wither and die, just like we see going on with Mama. So how do we know that nitrogen is the real problem with Mama? Well, since nitrogen is a vital component for chlorophyll, unhealthy plants tend to be yellower, or a more yellowish green. Compare these two plants. The one on the left has a nitrogen deficiency, the one on the right doesn't. Now, compare pre-Earth Mama with post-Earth Mama, and you can see that when she's in peak health, she is meant to be a super dark color of green, which tells us that her chlorophyll is operating at max capacity, and that before, it really wasn't. It was just kind of struggling along. Also helping our case here is the fact that even when Candace is hooked up to the CO2-inator, aka the treadmill, Mama shows no signs of physical recovery. The plant is still as floppy and lifeless as ever, despite all the carbon that our chosen one is supposedly emitting. But the clincher here is Earth's atmosphere. Isn't it strange that Mama just explodes in growth within minutes of being on Earth's surface? Not just growing healthy, but instantly becoming overgrown to the point of being a bloodthirsty monster. Well, unlike the trace amounts of CO2 in the atmosphere that we talked about earlier, nitrogen accounts for nearly 78% of the air that we breathe. Far more than carbon dioxide, far more than oxygen, and far and away the #1 element mixed in there. So if an alien plant was short of an element and then got flooded with that element, it would explain the insane levels of growth that Mama sees in this movie. Now, to be fair, Earth plants naturally get their nitrogen from the soil, not from the air, so that would be one major difference between Mama and an Earth plant. But you know, plants also don't grow eyes or produce mind-controlling spores, so I'm gonna let that one slide. In short, it is immediately clear that Super Big Doctor is a doctor in name only, and not in intelligence or training. Feebla Oot, the planet she chose to invade, is covered in mushrooms, and therefore should have plenty of carbon dioxide to allow her mind-controlling plant to thrive. Instead, she misjudged the root of her root problem. And while that certainly sucks for her conquest of the planet, it sucks worse for Candace. It means that ultimately she is not the chosen one. Not just because any human can produce carbon dioxide, but rather because CO2 levels were never the problem to begin with. Sorry, Candace.
Not fair.
It's a good thing the moral of this movie is that her being a good big sister is the thing that makes her special. Otherwise, this would have been a real downer of an ending. Just remember, kiddos, it's who you are as a person that matters the most, not the gases that you produce. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut. And hey, if you're looking for more Phineas and Ferb theories, click the box on the left where we dissect the science of the first ever episode of the show. Or if you're more into the lore of the series, check out this episode on the right where we look into how Dr. Doofenshmirtz is secretly the hero of the entire series. Phineas and Ferb is now 10 years old, meaning that those of you who grew up watching it are now ready to enter the dating scene. So in the hopes of helping you find your own true Isabella, it's time to welcome you back to Matt Pat's Guide to Finding the One, Animal Magnetism Magnifinator Edition. Hey baby, is there a magnet in your pants? 'Cause my magnetism whenever told you crazier science off their work. Today I'm returning to the world of Phineas and Ferb, which we did an episode on a couple months back. If you haven't seen that one, definitely go check it out. We basically prove that Dr. Doofenshmirtz is secretly the good guy, a sleeper agent for the OWCA. Episode is linked in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, so if you're so excited that you need to go watch it right now, well then, you know where to find it. Otherwise, just click the link at the end of the video. But even though that episode talked about how old Dr. Doof's not such a bad guy after all, it doesn't mean that he's not without a few flaws. Hey, we've all got our shortcomings, but it just so happens to be that Dr. Doofenshmirtz's weakness is literally his entire job. Starting from the very beginning, episode 1 of the series, we see how this so-called evil scientific genius basically doesn't even science, bro. This guy has hundreds of inventions over the course of the series, but the magnetism magnifinator from the pilot episode is not only the first that we see, but it's also the one that gets referenced time and time again over the next 4 seasons.
Quickly! We must separate the magnet from the magnifinator before it is too late! Is it just me, or is this a serious deja vu moment? I feel like I've totally been here before, like...
That's it, Agent P. You've got to get to that time machine and go back to the past, right before that giant tinfoil ball puts you in a full body cast for 18 months.
Basically, the magnetic magnifinator is a super strong magnetic laser that somehow sucks in a magnetic field on one end, amplifies it on the other, and manages to shoot it directly at a target, which in this case happens to be all the skyscrapers on the eastern seaboard. Dr. Doof's plan is to cover that entire part of the country in tinfoil, and then use the magnetism magnifinator to pull on the skyscrapers on the east coast so that everything on the east is pulled towards the west. His goal is to ultimately reverse the rotation of the Earth. Why would he want to reverse the rotation of the Earth? Well, that's a bit up in the air.
You may well ask yourself, why would he do this? Well, let me just answer that by saying I haven't really worked out all the bugs yet. I mean, you know, the tinfoil alone cost a lot.
But is Dr. Doof's most infamous invention of the entire series a scientific success, or just a load of electromagnetic excrement? Well, it seems like his invention is a complete disaster in every way. Today's episode actually looks at the science behind the magnetic magnifinator to reveal just how advanced Doof is, and probably more accurately, how smart the creators of the show were when they were designing this thing. And then I'll just talk about the critical flaw that makes this whole thing fall apart. So get ready, today is gonna be one polarizing episode. Polarizing episode. You get it? Because it's like, get it? Like magnets? Hey, look, okay, I haven't covered magnets on this channel before, okay? So I got a lot of pent-up puns to unleash. So even though he doesn't know why he's doing it, it's clear that Doof wants to reverse the rotation of the Earth. But already there's a huge problem with that. Pretty much the first thing you learn in physics is the concept of closed systems. Yeah, dust off like the first 10 pages of your high school physics textbook for this one. In this case, the eastern seaboard that Doof is shooting the Magnifinator at and his own headquarters are both part of what's known as a closed system. According to classical physics, exerting a force inside a closed system doesn't change anything about the system relative to its surroundings. In easier to understand terms, if Doof's goal is to change the rotation of the Earth in space, he's never gonna do that by shooting one thing on the Earth at another thing that is still on the Earth. Trying to do this would be like trying to move a car by putting a moving tire inside the vehicle. Nothing is gonna change. The only way for a car to move is for it to exert force against something external, like the road. By the same token, the only way to move an object like the Earth through space is for the object to exert a force against something outside of itself. When you're able to do that, that's what's known as an open system. But in order for magnets to affect anything about the Earth's rotation, he'd need to be aiming the Magnifinator at the planet next door, not just some tin foil a few buildings away.
As a lazy tailor would say, suit yourself.
But okay, so the cat's out of the bag that he can't change the rotation of the Earth. But maybe he could have done something else interesting with the Magnifinator instead. As it turns out, at the time of the premiere episode of Phineas and Ferb, Dr. Doofenshmirtz was actually 8 years ahead of time with the Magnifinator. And that's no joke. Believe it or not, astrophysicists have spent most of the last decade trying to catch up to exactly what you see him doing in this episode. You think that's nuts? Let's take a closer look at the magnetic Magnifinator to see just what's going on here. On the one end, you have this huge magnet, which seems to make sense if you're trying to suck the buildings right off the pavement with magnetism. But if you know anything about magnetism, you're probably going to notice two huge problems right off the bat. The first is that regular magnets don't have directionality. Sure, they have poles, but that doesn't make them directional. You can't just point a magnet like a gun and go, bang, I just shot you really hard with this magnetic field. When you create a magnet, it honestly just kind of sits there and emanates a magnetic field all around itself. It's not exactly all that threatening. Now, problem two is even bigger. Even if he has a strong magnet over here, it's not gonna do anything to those buildings over there. Magnetic strength works by the inverse cube law, which means that as two magnetic objects get farther and farther away, their attraction drops off exponentially. An object that's twice as far away from a magnet will require 8 times as much strength to attract it. Increase that distance by 10 times, and now you're gonna need to increase the strength of the magnet by 1,000 times to compensate. Dr. Doofenshmirtz is trying to use his magnet to pull on buildings a kilometer away, which is basically impossible for any magnet that exists on Earth. The strongest magnet that currently exists in the world today is located at the National High Magnetic Field Laboratory in Florida, which has a magnetic strength of 25 Tesla. That's Tesla, the unit used to measure magnetic fields, and not, the car. 25 Tesla is 500,000 times stronger than the Earth's own magnetic field, which seems ridiculously strong, but then remember that we as people living on the surface of the Earth don't even feel the Earth's magnetic field. And the only way that we ever even do notice it is if we're using an instrument sensitive enough to detect it, like a compass. So to get around these two major problems, Dr. Doofenshmirtz either needs to focus that magnet or find a way to get that magnetic field a heck of a lot closer to those buildings. And bizarrely enough, that is exactly what we see him doing in the show. You heard that right. Dr. Doof is doing the right thing.
I did not expect that.
Take another look at the parts of the Magnifinator, namely this tube right here and what looks to be a concentrated magnetic laser beam that he shoots out towards the city. He probably didn't know it at the time, but these are now real things that the most advanced physicists in the world are still working to develop. The first is this magnetic pipe, or hose, which is 100% 100% real. By placing a magnetic field close to the opening of a specialized tube, theoretical physicists, or just theorists, as I like to call them, have actually managed to preserve a magnetic field over a much longer distance than the field would have existed by itself. Right now, they believe they can actually preserve 90% of a magnetic field in a magnetic superconductor hose, transporting magnetism in a way that previously seemed impossible. The other thing that's going on here is potentially even more exciting, because it doesn't just involve magnets, it also involves lasers, which are just inherently cool. We can see that the Magnifinator doesn't just seem to be a plain old magnetic field generator, it's a laser beam at one end. And once again, Dr. Doof is way ahead of his time, creating what would have been the world's first super magnet laser, something that, as of 2016, is being built for the first time ever. These magnet lasers are pretty much exactly what they sound like. They're ultra powerful lasers that have the special ability of also creating extremely powerful magnetic fields, thousands of times more powerful than any magnetic field humans have created in the past. Basically, these things would be a lot like Metroid grapple beams. The physics behind them are incredibly complicated, and if you're a Faraday effect aficionado, then I invite you to dive into these things in the comments, but for what we're talking about right now, I'm basically gonna boil it down to the very top level. Lasers, which are basically streams of super energized electrons, they start to get all kinds of special properties as you turn up the intensity of the laser. One of the special properties that starts to happen is radiation friction, or RF. This is basically the friction between electrons at incredibly high energy levels, which gives you more than just atomic rug burn, it actually creates an ultra powerful magnetic field around the laser beam. Again, this is the made for YouTube version of this incredibly advanced science, so if this sounds interesting to you, then have a look at the stuff. It is literally as close as humans are gonna get to magic. Anyway, what you come out of this process with is a magnetic field on the order of 1 billion Gauss, which is a big number that doesn't mean a whole lot if we don't have anything to compare it to. So for comparison, an MRI machine creates a magnetic field of 70,000 Gauss, which is enough to interfere with pacemakers, metal prosthetics, or any electronics that get near the thing. And this magnetic field is in the billions, basically an astronomical level. You can do things with this level of Gauss like contain nuclear fusion. It's the kind of thing that rivals the magnetic strength of a neutron star. You heard that right. Doof created a device that rivals the power of stars. So yeah, with that kind of magnetism, Dr. Doofenshmirtz could definitely do some serious damage.
If you give me another chance, I promise to hurt you in the right way. With cartoonish physical violence and elaborate traps constructed out of strange things I've purchased over the internet.
Okay, so far we found a way to make the Magnifinator possible, in theory. But here's where it all comes undone. To create what he thinks will be a super strong magnetic attraction, Dr. Doofenshmirtz covers all the skyscrapers on the eastern seaboard with tinfoil. So let's see what happens at the big moment when he thinks he's gonna rip them all up.
Oh, the eastern seaboard, thereby reversing rotation of this. Well, the rotation of this. Well, that didn't work.
You bet it didn't, my little doofle pants. Get your dipoles straight, my friend. You created the world's first magnetic hose. You hooked it up to the world's most advanced magnetic laser in history, which can literally harness the power of effing stars. But you forgot one thing, one crucial detail in your entire plot. Tinfoil isn't magnetic. While it's certainly true that metals like iron and nickel are attracted to magnets, not all metals are. Ferromagnetism is the property that we use to describe things that are magnetic. What we refer to as tinfoil isn't ferromagnetic, and also isn't made of tin, actually. At least not today. Back in the 1800s, actual sheets of tin were commonly used, but when it came to covering food, they left everything they covered with a metallic flavor, which is why in the 1930s and 40s, tin was replaced with cheaper and tastier aluminum. But while switching to aluminum may help Doof's tuna sandwich stay fresher, it's not gonna help him create mega magnets anytime soon, since neither tin nor aluminum are magnetic. In fact, In the teaser for the upcoming Pixar movie Cars 3, we see Lightning McQueen get flipped into the air on the racetrack. Sparks fly, smoke billows from the car. It's not looking good for old Lightning, but there is some good news. He just saved 15% or more on his car insurance by switching to Geico. Welcome to Film Theory, the show where crazy ideas supported by detailed research always gets the checkered flag. Now, as many of you loyal theorists know, I love me some Pixar, even if I do have a strange way of showing it. And by strange way of showing it, I mean ruining your childhood memories of beloved characters. Look, I'm not the one who decided that everybody in WALL-E is a cannibal, I just pointed it out, okay? Don't kill the messenger, and then liquefy their body and drink them as creepy future food. But never fear those of you who wish to have your childhoods remain intact, because today's Pixar theory isn't gonna have some deep, dark twist. Or is it? No, it isn't. Probably. Instead, today we're simply going to consider the world of Cars. A world that looks just like our own, except that there's no people and all the machines run themselves. To catch you up, the first Cars movie gave us the story of a young hotshot race car named Lightning McQueen who gets a shot at the championship, but then gives it up because he realizes how important the other people in his, other cars in his life really are. The sequel was the next obvious place that you take that concept, a complicated spy thriller about car espionage and alternative fuel source conspiracy theories, because why not? And Cars 3 looks like it's lining up to be a comeback story. We've got a trailer which shows lightning in a catastrophic crash, and if this series keeps following the trajectory of the Rocky series, the third installment will be about our heroes fight back up to the top. And hey, if we're really lucky, we'll get a fourth one where McQueen races against a Russian muscle car and solves communism.
I must break you.
Sure, you laughed that sounds ridiculous, but I bet you didn't expect the spy thriller plot either. Long story short, the Cars universe has always been a weird one, filled with a lot of questions about the logistics of a world filled only with sentient automobiles. But one question none of us have ever really stopped to answer is this: are the cars in Cars really cars? I mean, sure, it's the title of the movie and they look and behave like cars, but who knows? That just may be more of mainstream media's fake news. I mean, they have eyes and tongues and there are no drivers, and let's be honest, how did a society of living cars even come to be in the first place? They're clearly on Earth, but there are no humans, so what happened? What are these creatures? I am 100% confident I figured it out, and spoiler alert, they're not cars. What started out as a simple, stupid question led me down the rabbit hole of this bizarre car-themed universe, and the answers I found will upend everything you thought you knew about Mater and the gang. And the details I find here pose some really interesting revelations about that infamous Pixar theory. A theory that you all have wanted me to cover for quite a long time. So theorists, start your search engines because it's time to take this Cars Omni-theory from 0 to 60 in about 15 minutes flat. Now, to begin, it probably merits taking a second to acquaint you with that Pixar theory. A theory that started with, as far as I can tell, online movie blogger John Negroni, which aims to unite all the Pixar movies into not just the same universe, but also come up with a cohesive timeline of events where one movie leads to the next, leads to the next. Suck on that, Marvel! Here's everyone thinking you started the whole huge connected cinematic universe thing, but Pixar's been doing it back since 1995, in a theoretical sense. So no wonder you don't have an Oscar award yet, and yet Academy Award-winning Suicide Squad does. Now, I'm not going to dive into the nitty-gritty of that theory today. It's one that we'll probably be piecing together on our own across multiple future Pixar episodes. But to get a taste of this thing and start you thinking about it, take the example of By and Large. Most casual Pixar viewers know it as the corporation that runs everything in WALL-E.
World leadership!
We have no one but them to thank for the cannibalistic cupcake in a cup. But for really astute viewers, you can actually see the company's rise to power throughout multiple other Pixar films. In Toy Story 3, you can see their logo on Buzz's battery. By the time you get to Up, By and Large is now involved in the construction business, with their logo on the equipment in front of Carl's house. And it's not just the equipment, B&L is also buying all the houses in Carl's neighborhood.
My boss will be happy to take this whole place off your hands and, for double his last offer. What do you say to that?
And get this, it's even spreading to the Cars franchise now. If you examine the Cars 3 extended trailer frame by frame, you see the logo appear in the stadium, making it the first time By and Large has appeared anywhere in the Cars movie series. Did you spot it? Here, let me slow it down for you. Still no? Here, let's go frame by frame. welcome to My Life Writing Theories. I live my life a quarter frame at a time. Now, the reason I wanted to start talking about this today is because I have a few problems with the Pixar theory timeline, and the first major batch revolves around cars. The theory goes that a super intelligent AI, first created by Syndrome in his quest to kill all the superheroes back in The Incredibles, forms BNL to take control of the planet. Along the way, intelligent animals like the ones that we see in Finding Nemo and Ratatouille rise up against humans, a war ensues, animals are killed off, and the AI, acting through by and large, send humans into space, thus kicking off WALL-E and leaving the planet alone to the AI. The AI begin a life of freedom on their newly conquered planet by assuming the form of sentient cars, planes, boats, and cranes. Cause seriously, think about the coolest way to get around. That's why you don't see humans or animals in either car movie, and yet see the remnants of human society like the Eiffel Tower, Route 66, and things like that. Oh man, you got all that? Picking apart and piecing together this whole theory in detail is gonna be like this channel's equivalent of FNAF. Well, no time like the present. Carpe that DM, let's start today. So this whole Pixar theory is an interesting explanation, but there are a lot of assumptions. Assumptions that, when you actually stop to look at the deeper evidence, just don't work out. And the first set of assumptions that I want to tackle today has to do with the nature of the cars. You see, based on the theory as it exists, the cars would be basically smart, driverless cars taken over by Syndrome's super advanced AI. They would be cars, machines with computers in them controlled by an AI, except they're not. The cars are actually organic creatures, living creatures with a car body and a tough exoskeleton, but containing some sort of internal organs, a soft and squishy inside like the center of a Tootsie Roll Pop. You could almost equate them to that terrible monster truck movie that no one bothered to see. By the way, it's worth mentioning that thing cost $125 million to make and only earned back $60 million. Makes you almost feel bad for them. Almost. Anyway, back to the good car movies. We know that the cars are living from a bunch of different evidence sprinkled throughout the various car features. First, they breathe oxygen. In the opening of Cars 2, we see super spy Finn McMissile put on an underwater respirator in order to swim out of sight of the criminal syndicate. Later in that same movie, we see plenty of scenes of cars eating and drinking. On the plane to Japan, we see snack foods littered around the floor, things like chips and sushi, and again at the party, more sushi at the bar. And of course, the infamous pistachio ice cream bit.
How about that pistachio ice cream?
A scene that tells us Mater knows what pistachios are, what ice cream is, and has tasted it and enjoyed it. And sure, we see them drinking varieties of oil and gas, presumably to power their engines, but why would they actually need to ingest food products if they weren't organic in some way? Even some of the offshoot cartoons support the idea of the cars being organic creatures. In the first Tales from Radiator Spring short, we see Lightning McQueen getting a case of the hiccups. Hiccups are caused by irritating the diaphragm, a dome-shaped muscle at the bottom of your chest. When you do things like eat or drink too quickly, it upsets the diaphragm and causes it to pull down in a jerky way. You suck air into your throat suddenly, your vocal cords close abruptly, and you're left with a hiccup. All of this evidence, from the underwater breathing to the food to the hiccups, implies that under the hood of the cars, both literally and figuratively, they possess internal organs like lungs, stomachs, and diaphragms in addition to their car engines. But perhaps the biggest confirmation comes from the animators themselves. In most interviews, the Pixar crew tends to be dismissive of biological questions as they relate to the cars.
I'm sorry, we had to turn off the video here.
But one featurette released on the official Disney Pixar channel entitled Pixar Studio Stories gave us all of the confirmation that we needed.
He can't open his doors because that's where his brains are.
They have a brain. A giant pink pulsating brain hidden behind those car windows. It's just disturbing. Try getting that out of your head the next time you see a Cars movie. Bring out the brain bleach, please. So it would appear that the cars are actual living creatures and not just some highly advanced driverless cars. And before you complain about how stupid that all sounds, there's an actual evolutionary change present throughout these films. At about 50 minutes and 10 seconds into Cars 2, as if watching nearly an hour of a kids movie featuring cars in Japan busting a fake eco-friendly fuel ring and a massive James Bond riff wasn't bizarre enough, we see birds. Except they're not birds. They're actually mini planes. Think that was just because the Pixar team was off their meds for what seems like the entirety of this movie? Well, think again, because in another of the Tales from Radiator Springs animated shorts, you actually get VW Beetles, tiny cars with insect wings that make up this disturbing universe's bug population, thus proving that the Pixar team is off their meds literally all the time, or on something else. Now, this is an important detail because it shows us that in this universe, these car-like creatures don't just become planes when they fly like the birds, but rather they can develop organic wings like those of a dragonfly. And all of this is without even mentioning the fact that there exist alien car-like species, as we see in Mater's Tall Tales UFO edition, which we know is true since Mater shows that he can in fact fly in the end of the episode. As one final detail, it's interesting to note that the rubber tires aren't part of the edition, which we know is true of a dragonfly. And all of this is without even mentioning the fact that there exist alien car-like species, as we see in Mater's Tall Tales UFO edition, which we know is true since Mater shows that he can in fact fly in the end of the episode. As one final detail, it's interesting to note that the rubber tires aren't part of these car creatures. In multiple parts of the series, but most notably Car 2's train scene, we see characters moving around with their tires removed. They're the equivalent of shoes for the cars, going on the feet, or in this case, rims. Suffice it to say, alien or no, these are living creatures with internal organs that are protected by a car-like exoskeleton, and with multiple differentiated animal-like species that have evolved over time, from literal boats, planes, and cranes to bug-like and bird-like animals. In short, when you look at all of this evidence, there is only one possible conclusion: that the cars in Cars aren't cars at all, but are much more likely a highly evolved form of insect. Sounds ridiculous, but think about it. Just like an insect has a hard exoskeleton made of chitin, the creatures in the Carverse have evolved a stronger exoskeleton made of various metals. Neither cars nor insects seem to possess an internal skeleton, and so in both creatures, muscles appear to be directly attached to the exoskeleton itself. An insect's exoskeleton isn't a single surface, but rather consists of multiple jointed plates, so that when an insect moves a muscle, it causes the connected exoskeleton plate pieces to move as well. It's the same style of movement that we see in the Cars. Multiple hard plates or shells moving when the internal musculature moves as well. But most importantly of all, and the piece of evidence that solidifies this, is as we saw with the VW Beetle example, some species of the Cars are able to grow wings that aren't made of metal. Instead, based on the appearance and behavior of those wings, they're made of chitin, just like the wings of a dragonfly, the same substance that makes up an insect's exoskeleton. Those chitin-based wings are a remnant from the Cars' evolutionary ancestors. The cars in Cars aren't cars, they're insects. And that does some really interesting things for the Pixar theory. First and foremost, it removes cars from being attached to the era of humans. That sort of evolution is gonna take a really long time, so get it away from the Wall-E's, Nemos, and Incredibles of the world and put it out toward the future. But surprisingly enough, we do happen to have one film in Pixar's lineup that does follow super intelligent bugs in their quest for survival. Bugs that already have figured out ways to master machines. Bugs that live in a world where there are remnants of human society, but you see no humans present. Yes. What I propose to you is that Cars isn't so much its own entity, but rather A Bug's Life 2, 3, and coming up on 4. The natural progression of insects evolving and taking over the planet Earth. And with that, we have the first puzzle piece.
Oh, wait, why? I did not deserve that. I did not deserve that. Come on.
Max, 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 Super Max, Max, Super, Super Max, 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 Super Max, Max, Super, Super Max, Max, Super Max, Max, Super, Super Max, 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 Super Max, Max. Ik mis geen race, heb scheid aan mijn centen. Ik zie Max zijn mooiste momenten. Hij is de king van Barcelona. Rijdt alles op van Spa tot Monza. De geur van rubber, hij smelt een asfalt. Ik juich als Max weer één voorbij knalt. Zijn inhaalacties zijn bijzonder. Het is een baas, een wereldwonder.
That's a boy, klik aan
Fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1.
Bizar, fucking bizar. Ja, dan zit je naar dingen te kijken en te open. En daar is hij. Max stap in de laatste bocht.
Zo waar.
Yo hey, yo ho.
Super Max, Max, Super, Super Max, 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 Super Max, Max, is de nummer 1. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1.
Yo, fucking hell, wat bizar. Ongelooflijk. Sportoverwinningen zijn zo mooi. En deze is de allermooiste die ik in mijn leven gezien heb. Jongen, jongen, jongen. Super, super, Max, 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 super, Max, Max, super, super, Max, 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 super, Max, Max, super, Max, Max, super, super, Max, 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 super, Max, Max. Yo, fucking hell, wat bizar. Max, 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 super, Max, Max, super, super, Max, 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 super, Max, Max, super, super, Max, 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 super, Max, Max, super, super, Max, 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 super, Max, Max. Ik mis geen race, heb schijt aan mijn centen. Ik zie Max zijn mooiste momenten. Hij is de king van Barcelona. Rijdt alles op van Spa tot Monza. De geur van rubber en smeltend asfalt. Ik juich als Max weer één voorbij knalt. Zijn inhaalacties zijn bijzonder. Het is een baas, een wereldwonder. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1. Bizar, fucking bizar. Ja, dan zit je naar dingen te kijken en te open. En daar is hij. Max Verstappen in de laatste bocht in Barcelona. Yo hey, yo ho. Max, 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 super Max, Max, super, super 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 Max, 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 super Max, Max. Jarenlang zit je te kijken en te hopen op succes. Zodra je Max ziet rijden, dan denk je yes. Hij is niet te passeren, niemand krijgt het cadeau. Hij is een pure racer, vang hem op en roep no. Hij is de nieuwe baas. Max is de nieuwe baas. Ja, wij gaan helemaal los. Super Max, Super Max, ik ben apetrots. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1. Fucking hell, wat bizar. Ongelooflijk. Sportoverwinningen zijn zo mooi. En deze is de allermooiste die ik in mijn leven gezien heb. Jongen, jongen, jongen. Max, Max, super Max, Max, super, super Max, 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 Max, super Max, Max. Yo, fucking hell, wat bizar. Max, 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 super Max, Max, super, super Max, 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 super Max, Max, super, super Max, 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 super Max, Max, super, super Max, 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 super Max, Max. Ik mis geen race, heb scheid aan mijn centen. Ik zie Max zijn mooiste momenten. Hij is de king van Barcelona. Rijdt alles op van Spa tot Monza. De geur van rubber en smeltend asfalt. Ik juich als Max weer één voorbij knalt. Zijn inhaalacties zijn bijzonder. Het is een baas, een wereldwonder. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1.
Bizar! Fucking bizar! Ja, dan zit je naar dingen te kijken en te hopen. En daar is hij. Max stap in de laatste bocht in Barcelona. Yo hey! Yo ho!
Max, 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 super Max, Max, super, super 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 Max, 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 super Max.
No, what? No.
Lang zit je te kijken en te hopen op succes. Zodra je Max ziet racen op de baan, dan denk je yes. Het is niet het passeren, niemand krijgt een cadeau. Hij is een pure racer, vang ze op en goed no. Hij is de nieuwe baas. Max is de nieuwe baas. Ja, wij gaan helemaal los. Super Max, Super Max, ik ben apetrots. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1.
Yo fucking hell, wat bizar!
Nou, dat is
Sportoverwinningen zijn zo mooi. En deze is de allermooiste die ik in mijn leven gezien heb. Jongen, jongen, Yo, fucking hell, wat bizar!
Max, 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 super Max, Max, super, super Max, 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 super Max, Max, super, super Max, 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 super Max, Max, super, super Max, 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 super Max, Max. Ik mis geen race, heb scheid aan mijn centen. Ik zie Max zijn mooiste momenten. Hij is de king van Barcelona. Rijdt alles op van Spa tot Monza. De geur van rubber en smelt een asfalt. Ik juich als Max weer één voorbij knalt. Zijn inhaalacties zijn bijzonder. Het is een baas, een wereldwonder. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1.
Bizar! Fucking bizar! Ja, dan zit je naar dingen te kijk eens, de open. En daar is hij. Max stap in de laatste bocht in Barcelona. Yo, hey. Yo, ho. Max, 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 super Max, Max, super, super 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 Max, 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 super Max, Max. Jarenlang zit je te kijken en te hopen op succes. Zodra je Max ziet racen op de baan, dan denk je yes. Hij is niet te passeren, niemand krijgt het cadeau. Hij is een pure racer, van zijn op en goed nou. Hij is de nieuwe baas. Max is de nieuwe baas. Supermax, Supermax, ik ben apetrots.